Yeah, my name is Theo. I'm originally from the Bay Area in the States, and I went to Life West um, somewhere in the early 2000s. I graduated 2007, and initially I thought I would practice in the States, but I felt an itch to practice outside because I had a lot of friends that went to Spain and went to various places around the world, and they they said how much they loved working outside. So I thought that would sound pretty cool. So initially I thought of working in China out of all the places, because I was just doing research and seeing where chiropractors are in the world, and I saw that there wasn't much um, chiropractors in China, Shanghai in particularly. So I actually went there when I graduated, with the intention of eventually starting a practice there, or maybe finding someone to work with. Um, I stayed there for about 2.5 months and saw that I didn't really like living there because of the pollution. So I went to Singapore, and I had some friends that were practicing here. So um, I stayed in Singapore about 2 weeks, and from there I decided to start a practice. So I went back to the States, San Francisco, and I told my parents that I was going to go, and got my stuff a few months later and came here. And, I thought I was ready to open a practice. In many ways, I was. Um, but, you know, you can prepare as much as you want. You can take as much business courses with various peoples, but you really don't know how green you are until you start actually practicing. But thankfully, I found MLS um, during the course of my being a student. In fact, it was the first seminar that I took, like 2 weeks into school. I heard Arno speak in seminar, and I felt turned on by it. Um, and I remember taking it very lightly. I knew the seminar was Saturday and Sunday, but I was busy on Saturday, and somehow I thought in my head if I went on Sunday, it would be okay. So I actually showed up on Sunday, and I realized normally people that enter the seminar aren't allowed to go because I just missed like half of it. Thankfully, Arno said yes, and from there, he was teaching us setups, and I really didn't know what the hell he was talking about because I'm like jumping into the adjusting day. And luckily for me, I actually got the first adjustment. And from there, I was hooked on seminars.
Mm-hmm.
I would take seminars like at least 2 to 3 every month. I was lucky to go to a school that had a high density of practitioners teaching. Um, and with MLS, the thing that turned me on the most was, um, messages of living from the inside out, telling people what's right in them rather than what's wrong with them. And probably the biggest caveat that attracted me was um, Arno's goal in practice, which was to raise consciousness. And at the time, I was very much into spirituality, and in many ways, it led me to chiropractic. Before even entering school, I really didn't have an idea of the deep implications and the deep meaning behind chiropractic itself. I thought it was just a tool for me to help people. That's like on a very superficial level, that's what I thought chiropractic was. It was In fact, it was between um, psychotherapy and chiropractic for me. I knew I wanted to get involved with people. So I eventually chose chiropractic because it allowed me to work on people's minds, hearts, and of course, bodies. And I had the insight to see, you know, it's a lot easier to get people to work on themselves if they're working on their bodies first, because the body is meant to give us communications, and most of us aren't very good at communicating with ourselves, frankly speaking. Um, and I'm in a place in my practice right now where I'm seeing that it's really not it's really not about the pain that people are coming in for. It's really about how they're living their lives, their relationship with themselves, their identity, their upbringing, their belief systems. And, I live in a country where people work extremely hard. Um, and it's very normal for people to work 50, 60 hours a week here. So I began to realize the real subluxation is survival. Most of the people that see me work extremely hard, and they wake up every morning and they realize, they never get to realize themselves, because a majority of human beings' resources is still very geared towards survival. We're in a very early part of our evolution, as advanced as we think we are, because we've invented the internet and we have cars and space shuttles. We're still very, very early, very infancy in our evolution. Most of the world is well, no, most people are either living, they're living to survive, essentially. And right now with the virus, it's becoming more apparent that people's survival is being compromised by something invisible that we don't even know of, and social economic pressures. So, any questions so far for you guys?
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to hear how you address that subluxation that's like in the head. You can't necessarily reach it. You were talking about finding out what's right in the person versus what's wrong with the person. And how do you address that with patients?
That's a very good question. Well, I get them to, I don't even really talk about chiropractic when people come to see me. I don't even mention the word subluxation so much. I mean, I bring it up, but I bring it up in the context of like less life expression, less light expression, and really I get them to see how they're living their lives and how they're getting misaligned. I don't know, they're static all the time at work. They're surviving for their families. They're giving so much to the people they care about. They're giving so much for their future, and very little attention is brought to themselves. So every time people come in for a consultation, I get them to realize that, and I take it pretty deep. Essentially, well, depending on what level they're at, or depending on what threshold of pain they're in. A lot of acute people, I don't really talk so much. I don't even like tell them the big story. If they're coming in with like excruciating pain and they're just almost, practically immobilized, I just pretty much ask them what's going on with them, and then I work on them right away. And within like 10 minutes, I'm essentially going through chiropractic as much as I can, but with some level of gentleness. And essentially, if you sharpen your skills up and you work on people, they'll understand chiropractic innately. There are times many times in my practice, because this is very multicultural environment, some of my clients don't even speak English. So I'm not even communicating with them. They're just coming in, I'm adjusting them. And then next thing you know, they're just turned on and they just sign up for packages right away. And I give like multiple fee systems in my practice. I do single sessions, I do multiple sessions, and oftentimes enough, I just adjust them and I hardly even need to say anything, and they'll just be turned on by the adjustment itself. And this is why it's incredibly important to hone your skills as much as possible. And I've told Nicholas, I've taken MLS so many times when I was a student. And every time, whether I was like being part of the staff or being a student, I've always learned something new. And even watching Arnold adjust, not too long ago on a video, I saw that some part of his skills has been sharpened, even after decades of working on people. And although maybe his adjusting skills may be diminished, even though I saw that it didn't, it's really not what you're doing with your hands, but it's really who you are as a person. And this is why it's incredibly important for you guys or important for us to continue to work on ourselves and awaken I know I sound like Tony Robbins, the giant within us. But the real illusion that we have within ourselves is we're too small, we're not good enough, we're not big enough. And that's essentially a huge illusion. It's told within us in science that we're just a small piece of the universe, we're just a speck of dust in all the cosmos. It's told in us in governments that Big Brother is watching us and it's all conspiracy with this virus thing. All of these dialogues that make us feel so small. It's even told within, excuse me, religion that, God is such a big entity and we have to try so hard to prove ourselves to God. All of these things are lies. And it's essentially indoctrined since we're children. And, I explained this in my consultation, the whole birth of our culture. We're brought into this world. We know we're amazing. And then somewhere down the line, we find out, or we're told a lie, that we're not good enough and that we need to earn our way to be respected and loved in society. It starts from school because we're being compared against. It's told in our culture, in order for you to be a successful person, you have to earn money, you have to earn your respect. And I hope someday I'm right, but I believe one day this is going to be a human crime, because the nature of everything is everyone and everything, every speck of matter in this universe is equally important to the next. And it's highly immature because we understand so little about the universe to believe that we're not that important, or that another person's value is greater than another just because they make more money, or just because they're smarter, or just because they're better looking. So, I talk a lot about cultural things in my consultations and in my practice. And it turns on with a lot of people because it's the truth. It's what everyone experiences. Not many people have realized God within them. Not many people have realized their own innate intelligence. So I would say it's a very important role for all of us to develop an intimate relationship with this intelligence. And it's not something that you can ever read about as much as green books that you're reading, or as much as the Bible you may read, or as much as whatever Eckhart Tolle or Adyashanti you're reading, Buddha. It really doesn't matter. You could only understand this intelligence by having a direct connection with it. And you can experience it through your hands, you can experience it through your craft and your work, you could experience it through interacting with yourself. And I would say it's very important for you guys to convey to people when you're communicating with them that being uncomfortable is not a bad thing, that pain is actually a good indicator of developing a deeper communication with yourself. So I heavily emphasize that in practice, and depending on what part of their growth that they're in, I'll tell them pain is good, pain is your friend. Of course, if someone's coming in with acute pain, I don't tell them that, because they'll have like this fuck off um, thought, and you can't really blame anyone for thinking that way, because when I'm really feeling angry, or if I'm really feeling sad, um, I don't always want to hear the truth. And there's a big difference with telling someone the truth and being the truth. And if you become the truth, you don't necessarily have to communicate much. People will just receive it from you through some innate osmosis. Any questions before I dive
Yeah,
deeper?
just want to say something. Arnold sent his regards to you and your family. He sent me a text. He said, make sure you send a message to Theo.
Oh,
And
thanks.
he's very, very happy that you're willing to do this, like, talk with us.
Yeah, it's my pleasure and it's my honor as well.
I have a question. So, hi, I'm Charlie. Nice to meet you, Dr. Theo. So you were saying basically like your new patients, you would mostly, like sometimes you don't even explain chiropractic to them. It's just, you just kind of show, like do the adjustment and let that do the work to help them understand what innate intelligence is. Because I'm aware, like, I feel like most of the public aren't aware of this concept, like the vitalistic.
Yeah, I mean, most of them don't even understand, and they're not interested to understand chiropractic. So it's very easy when you love something with like all of your heart and soul to want to share it with others. And people may not want it. I mean, this is why religion is so unattractive, especially with like, I don't know, what is it called? The people that knock in front of your door and they ask you, do you want the Bible? It's not very attractive proposition. It's a lot more attractive if you come in with no attachment for them to even get you, and you serve whatever their needs are. And most of their needs is just to get out of pain.
And sorry, go on.
And if you just have the right space in your heart, all it takes is a few words, because people really don't listen to what you say. And I'm sure you guys heard, only about 10% of speech is verbal. 90% of speech is like your tone, your intention, your energy. So if you just come from that space and you just tell them, you just see if someone's coming in and struggling, you just tell them it's time to love yourself more. And then you just hold that stillness for them. They'll understand. They'll innately understand, even if it's not even something intellectual. And usually it's not intellectual. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that does.
Go deeper into it?
No, that makes sense. And also, you kind of mentioned that practicing in Singapore, there were some people that came in that didn't even speak English. And it seems like I kind of got the concept of how you communicate with patients with the intention. But my question is, in Singapore, I know they speak a lot of different languages. Do you speak like Mandarin or Cantonese or any other language?
Unfortunately, not. I'm very lazy with
Okay.
learning. Um, yeah, I'm very. I mean, I guess I'm very logical, and when I do learn, when I do put energy to learn something, it is something, instead of learning Mandarin, I can learn about technology. I can learn about some other things that will hone my practice. I would say, however, if you're practicing in a country like Spain, which is primarily like Spanish speaking, and you don't want to learn Spanish, that's not really respectful of the culture.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, cool. I just wanted to see because I was wondering.
If I was working in China, I would learn Mandarin.
Okay.
But Singapore is primarily English-speaking country, so the natural default is English as communication, and people don't see it as rude if you're not speaking their native tongue.
Right. Okay.
And I do have like several clients, and I was telling Nicholas in chat and Facebook, it's depending on what culture people are coming from. I have quite a lot of clients from India.
Mm-hmm.
And although I don't really practice yoga, I do understand yoga philosophy quite well because it's very chiropractic.
Yeah.
And people just really understand intrinsically, because it's in their culture, this
Mm-hmm.
chiropractic language. And I would say that's a big advantage in the East, because it's ingrained in the culture through Buddhism. It's ingrained in Hinduism. So I find it quite easy to connect with people. But even people from America that come in, because I get a lot of expats that see me, they also get chiropractic. I just, I pick up a certain sense of where they're coming from, like what country they're coming from and where they're at. And I change the language regarding that. So if I'm seeing, and even um, profession specific, like I'm in the CBD right now, financial district. So I can very much talk about how finance and how markets move and how people think. Because from someone that's doing trading, when they're looking at market movements, they're seeing human behavior in a financial kind of context. Or
Yeah.
if I'm being an engineer, I'm going to talk about cantilevers and leverage and being in static positions, and why you're at a mechanical disadvantage when you're sitting down all the time. And they normally get it. So I can mix physics or quantum physics in it. I can mix finance. Um, I can even talk about plumbing and how it has to do with this, what a subluxation is and what happens when a clog gets piped. I mean, a pipe gets clogged. So, if you guys learn how to speak in very like layman terms and not even think about uttering chiropractic words that make you sound very smart, people will get it. And oftentimes enough, I remember taking one of Arnold's seminars, Masterpiece Training Camp. It was one of the second to the last ones that he was actually teaching people. And during that seminar, he would have some lay people explain chiropractic to the audience. And most of the time, these lay people would do a lot better job explaining chiropractic than the chiropractic students. Because, the title of a doctor or the title of a chiropractor is in many ways, it's a crutch. Because if you're taught, you have this idea that you're a doctor or a chiropractor, this automatic default is you should sound intelligent as much as possible. And people really don't need to know how smart you are. They just really care about whether you can help them or not. Of course, there are some people that are very scientific and analytical. Maybe they're like professors. But even then, they really don't want to hear so much. They think they know already what chiropractic is. So, by the default is you just got to assume that, you got to come in with a respectful attitude. I see quite a lot of medical doctors in my practice, heart surgeons and orthopedics. And, I kind of explain them in a very much context, depending on what level they're at, the paradigm of even the medical profession versus chiropractic, and how we really don't interfere with each other. Because, the context of a medical system or even a scientific system is, the universe is an unfriendly place. That's their default. And with chiropractic, it's the opposite. We believe the universe is friendly. The universe is loving. We don't necessarily treat or diagnose anything. We just turn on life. And a lot of doctors, won't necessarily oppose to that if you come from that space. But if you have any kind of speech where you're like medical bashing or saying like how you're better than medicine, that's very divisive in nature. And life is not so binary. It's not like black or white. It's not like good or right, me versus you. It's about everything. And it's really it's about loving and appreciating everything. Because if we come from universal intelligence and we are innate intelligence, somewhere down the line, this innate intelligence had to create, an asshole. It had to create a medical doctor. It had to create a chiropractor. It had to create even something like war. We may believe that all of these things, these opposing forces are bad, but if you deem it to be bad, then you're deeming universal intelligence to be imperfect. And we're supposed to believe as chiropractors that it is perfect in its intelligence. And whatever level that people are at right now, that's just where they're at. Wherever state of consciousness the world is in, which is the default of fear, then that's just where we're at. So, I noticed in the beginning of this whole virus pandemic thing, most of the world's default is it's bad for us. Viruses are bad. So, I did notice when I was telling people like the chiropractic idea of a virus, they're not willing to always pick it up. When it comes to communicating with fear versus some truth, fear will always win, especially when people are still in very much survival state, like I've said many times already. So really, like the biggest subluxation that we can ever do, which we're not even capable of doing, is to remove survival out of a human being's experience. And how much of us can help people get better, help people get a better job, or help people find love in their life. Because human relationships is another form of survival. If you don't have people that are close and dear to you, it's very hard to even survive, to live. People need connection. People need love. So, as a practitioner, how can I bring these things to people? That's like the the holy grail of chiropractic and the holy grail of self-development. And frankly speaking, we're not, there's no practitioner out there right now, in my opinion, that's even solving this problem. No offense to the people that are trying, including me. It's, you know, these problems that we face in our culture, in our society, it's a lot bigger than we can ever really imagine. And I would go as far as to say it's not necessarily a physical thing. It's more of, like I said, it's a conscious thing. It's a point of consciousness. So any questions for you guys?
So what do you think is like the biggest difference practicing, like, you know, in the US or practicing in a different country like Singapore?
I don't think there's any difference other than, you know, there is a disadvantage in the States where people pay with insurance a lot. I would highly encourage cash practice. I know a lot of colleagues of mine in the States that do only cash. There's big upsides to that. For one, if someone's paying out of their own pocket, then you're kind of holding them responsible for their own health. They're seeing that there's some kind of exchange, that it's their money. And I do have some expats with like American insurance, and what a lot of them do is they just claim the adjustment themselves. They actually do the work themselves, like whatever paperwork they need to do. I know a lot of practices in the States do the paperwork for them, and it's easier to get them to come in if they don't see that it's hurting their pocket in any way. But, you know, the practice dynamics is very different when I visit some of my colleagues that are doing like mostly insurance versus the ones that are doing cash. And I would always see the cash people. I see a lot more smiles in people's faces in cash practices. But as far as difference in country, I believe once you have like hone your skills, it really doesn't matter where you practice in the world. It really doesn't matter whether you're in San Francisco or Boulder, Colorado, which is like the chiropractic place that people like to go to because people are very health oriented there. I think I heard in a podcast like this that for every like 50,000 people, there's one chiropractor in Boulder, some number, some figure like that, and it doesn't seem like people are struggling there that are in practice. So this whole scarcity model is also something that we need to eradicate. It's a big illusion, and it goes back to the whole survival game. We're told that there's not enough resources, that there's not enough anything. And if you look at the Earth as like a energy system, Earth is the closed energy system. It's self-recycling, it's highly intelligent. So if innate intelligence or universal intelligence created this Earth for us, it created enough energy for us to sustain ourselves. We're not overpopulated. Last year, or for the last few decades, we're producing twice as much food in the world than there are human beings. So we have about 7 billion on this earth, and we produced enough food to feed 14 billion people. And, you know, land is also not scarce, because if you look on a plane, most of the land that we have on this earth is not lived on. People don't live on it. We're just congested within our own cities. So one of the things that we can do as a culture, which, you know, obviously I don't have the power to do right now, is to, you know, encourage like high-speed bullet trains throughout our countries. If we had bullet trains all over the earth, people can live a lot further apart and they won't feel so frustrated being in like congested cities. So I think about these things in my practice all the time. I think about like the cultural like evolution and where we're at. So I would say not to have any limited identity, to remove the notion that you're a chiropractor or even a man or a woman, as weird as that sounds. You are an innate being on this earth. You exist as you exist. So, you know, studying things like Zen, yoga, even reading the Bible. I don't really necessarily read that much, but when I have like a Christian person come to me in my practice, I can even explain chiropractic in a Christian way. I can explain it in a Muslim way. I can explain it in a Hindu way. Because, our language is not exclusive to chiropractic, it's universal. It's spread throughout the cosmos. It's innate. So, if you come up with this kind of dualistic thinking that chiropractic is something different than something else, then you're not really understanding chiropractic. Make sense to you guys? So any more questions for you guys?
Quick question. What is your layout of your clinic like? Like, is it open concept? How many tables?
It's an open concept. I see like 8 people at once sometimes. Usually it's like 6 or 7. It's very formatted like a BGI practice, even though I've never learned BGI. When I first started to practice, I didn't work that way. I worked in like private rooms because I was really into having like an intimate connection with my clients. So I would bounce between, well, first it started off as like a single room when I first started, where my consultation room was also everything, my adjusting room. And it was just a big room, and I used like dividers, and I was even my own receptionist. So, I would encourage you guys, depending on what skill level you're at, to start a practice like that, to be your own reception, to be your own everything. I mean, if you're just seeing like 5 or 10 people a day, you really don't need to have a staff answering your calls. Yeah, once you're like around the 20, 30 client a day mark, you can consider getting some help. But even then, I've known people in practice that are seeing like 40 to 50 people a day without any help. I don't know how they do it, but I mean, if I really push myself, I can probably figure a way to do it. But I can show you guys my office right now, so you can see. But this is the main adjusting room. Can you see?
Yep.
Yeah, so I work with people in rooms like this, and I essentially adjust them. I let them rest. I do upper cervical work, so it's usually the first adjustment that I do on people. And then I let them rest, and then I adjust segmentally. So I adjust people in sections, and then I let the body integrate with the adjustment. And, the most ideal situations, which I suppose is a limitation in Singapore, people aren't necessarily deeply into yoga and spirituality here in the way maybe somewhere like California would be. So I do tell them when I adjust them, the best adjustment that I can deliver on you is when you really meditate within your own self and look at yourself from the inside out. And some people get it. Some people just burst out crying when I'm adjusting them. But it's pretty rare here in Asia for people to express themselves in that way. So usually people are just resting and just chilling. And I suppose it's part of my practice. I'm quite busy, so I don't necessarily give people a stage to go within themselves. And I would say that's an advantage that network practitioners are really good at. They are very good at setting the stage. It's not necessarily network that is doing the adjustment. It's not because they're doing network. It's because they're doing so little on people, and they're so good at setting a stage for people to go within themselves. So if you're running like a network practice, the dynamics of the people you're serving is very different. People tend to be more spiritual, more intuitive within themselves. I don't run a practice like that because for me, I want to see everyone. So I try to make it kind of streamlined as much as possible. And that's an advantage of becoming a really good adjuster, because regardless of what level of people are at, if you're a very good mechanical adjuster, you can get quite far. And pretty much, learn as much tools as possible. I know some people fall in love with a certain technique and they say, just become really good at that. I don't necessarily believe that. And then when I look at some of my colleagues that are saying that, I'm looking at how they're living their lives, and I'm not judging them, but, they have hobbies like motorcycles or golf or whatever they're into. And I'm not saying they shouldn't have those hobbies, but if you can make chiropractic like your main hobby, you can pretty much learn techniques all the time. And even if you don't want to adjust extremities, take an extremity class, take a class on, learn network, learn VGI, learn whatever you can, whenever you can. There's so many seminars, I'm sure you guys realize that you can take on a continual basis. And all you really need to do is learn like one important thing in that seminar, and it'll take you so far in your practice. Because when a client of yours comes in with a certain type of problem and you can help them with it, and if you compound that through time, the seminar will pay for itself, even if it's one little tiny insignificant move.
Do you use any analysis tools in your office?
I just feel I used to do thermography, because when I was doing upper cervical work, I was scanning people all the time and looking at the patterns. Eventually I realized, I become so engrossed and dependent on the technology. And for me, that's not innate intelligence. The greatest technology is the technology within you. So if you can learn to hone your intuition, I know a lot of practitioners don't like to hear that. Some people, because people love certainty. People want some absolutes. And here's the caveat: chiropractic is not about absolute. It's about getting people to be comfortable with the unknown. That's where we're living our life. And I use analogies all the time. I tell people, when you make friends, you don't think about making friends with them. You don't think about how many times it takes to meet them. You don't have an analysis tool on what you need to say and what you need to do. And it definitely doesn't work that way with love. When you're looking for a partner, there's no agenda. So if you can formulate your practice very much like how we interact with life, like in life, you will start to notice, you will start to get a certain clientele that comes to you that makes your life easier. Yep. some people love X-rays. Some people love, seeing thermography scans. I have the Insight subluxation station. I do scan people on the first visit just to get them to understand chiropractic in a more linear sense. But I really don't use that as like a tool to, analyze where I need to adjust people. And the more you practice, the more you realize it's not necessarily where you're adjusting a person, but it's the intention that really matters. Of course, you need some skill to adjust people because it helps people understand what you're trying to do through some mechanical movement. We're still very kinesthetic people. So if you can work and move a joint, then people can start feeling certain ways. They start releasing endorphins and cephalons, and you'll get them to open up to you more. So a lot of people that come in for like acute pain, once I do work on them and they feel some endorphin release, they become more susceptible to communicate with. So, I would say it's very important to have or create some kind of intimate environment for people. And even if you're adjusting in an open room, people will still feel it. Any more questions? Where are you guys in your school right now? Everyone's studying right now, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're all online right now. It's very interesting, to say the least, to try to learn all this stuff on the internet. It's not quite the chiropractic way. We're so hands-on and kinesthetic and involved, and just feel so disconnected, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I really miss practice. I've been worked with people for several weeks now, and the government here just extended the lockdown for another month. So it looks like I'm gonna have 2 months total without being in practice. I am spending time writing. I'm spending more time with my kids. Obviously, I have 2 kids, 4 and 7. So they're not going to school, obviously. So I'm spending more time with them. So, you can definitely, I'm sure you've heard it from a lot of people, you can definitely spend a lot of time to read and meditate and work on yourselves. Practice will get you to confront all of yourself. So if you're not like doing your inner work, eventually when you start practicing, you will be forced to. So the more you work on yourself, the less obstacles you'll have in practice once you guys do start. So I would spend time meditating. I have a yoga practitioner recently introduced me to Adishanti. He's like the Zen master. I highly recommend reading his stuff. He talks a lot about the enlightening experience and awakening experience. Have you guys heard of him?
How do you spell that?
Let me type in the chat. Is there a chat in here? Yeah.
Yeah. Go to more and click chat.
The title of his book is End of Your World. He has a few books. And in fact, when I was a student, I experienced a lot of what this guy is talking about. I didn't know what the hell it was that I was experiencing, but I actually something like awoken inside of me when I was like the first year student, and essentially I was feeling depressed for about a year. This book explains why I was feeling that way. But essentially, when you do work on yourself, when you encounter any type of pain in your life, it's a chance for you to awaken to your true nature. And this is why being comfortable with pain and being comfortable with things that people aren't comfortable with, and getting them to realize that these things aren't necessarily bad things, but they're actually gifts for us. It's very important to understand these things. Even talking things like death, something as morbid as death. We assume it's bad. We assume time is evil. And it goes back to, again, the scientific premise that the universe is against us. Even time is against us, right? If time kills us because you're studying in Singapore right now, in US right now, is taking time away from your family. So you think time is robbing you of something. You feel that you want to go back to this country and be with your family. That's a limited perception of time itself. Time is something we created to learn to love ourselves more. Life and death needs to happen for us to appreciate life. So, when you talk about these universal truths in your practice, people will pick it up and they'll get it. They may not fully comprehend what you're trying to convey, but if you can talk about the uncomfortable aspects of living and how they're used to enrich us and get us to love more, people will appreciate that. Okay, any other questions?
So how did taking like MLS, why do you think that every chiropractic student needs to do MLS?
I wouldn't say everyone needs to. I would say I would recommend it. And some people, some people manual adjustment really doesn't fit them. Maybe they've had like a history of trauma in their life where the mechanical adjustment reminds them of that trauma, and they feel that they need some lighter, like lower force work. So they maybe get into BGI, or maybe get into network, or maybe get into activator. That's perfectly fine. Of course, I would be biased, and I would say if you could master all these techniques and dedicate your life to them and have some good solid foundation through MLS or something along those lines, that would be the best case scenario. But no, I wouldn't say that everyone should take MLS. I believe so, but the truth is not everyone will. And not everyone will really reach astronomical levels of like an Arno or Jeremy Brook or Wade. So it would be not intellectually honest if I were to say everyone needs to take MLS, even though that's what I feel. You guys get what I'm saying? It's also, it's very easy to think everyone needs to be adjusted. Not everyone needs to be adjusted. Not everyone needs to get adjusted once a week for the rest of their life, or every once a month. Whatever people want is what they want. And the more you like awaken to the true nature and the more loving you become, the more you realize, just loving people for wherever they're at is more important than anything. Whether they're, you know, a murderer or a rapist. I know it's quite radical for me to say these things, but life will serve you a lot better if you can have somewhat, you know, similar belief to this, frankly speaking. You know, people don't need anything. They just need to awaken to their true nature. But if someone's not really awake, you know, ready to awaken to the truth that they should be changing their lives and getting adjusted and eating better and loving more, who am I to say that those things are bad for them? And if I look at my own life and whatever has brought me to the person I'm at, you know, my parents had no idea what chiropractic is. Just to share like a background with you guys, my parents are Vietnamese. They immigrated to the US after the war. I mean, my father fought in damn war. And, you know, it's very easy to vilify even something like a war. But if I were to say war is bad, then I would say my existence is bad because I came from war. You guys get where I'm going at? So I'm not saying war is good, but on a deeper, you know, existential level, I am saying everything is good. It doesn't mean I condone violence. It doesn't mean I, you know, support vaccines or support the medical profession. But I do understand it does have a purpose in our evolution right now. And whatever people feel that they need, whether they need a vaccine more than get an adjustment, I don't feel like I need to change their view, even though I can tell them, look into it. It doesn't mean I won't tell them that they should like read about it and look into it, but I really don't like, I don't necessarily like do any attacks on any profession or tell people not to take vaccines in my practice. Of course, in Singapore, it would be unwise to run a practice like that because I can get in trouble. But it really doesn't, in my opinion, it really doesn't serve the practice if I do talk about controversial things, because we really don't know what people need and what they don't need. And that's very important for you guys to understand that. You guys get where I'm coming from?
Yes.
Yeah. And if you do, you know, speak from that kind of tone, even though it seems like I could be strong, so I can go on that more extreme side. But when I do remember that it's really not about getting people to understand me or getting people to understand about chiropractic, it normally serves me better in the practice when I'm not. But, you know, I would say, yeah, everyone here should be taking MLS since this is an MLS talk. And, you know, the basis and the foundation of chiropractic and what Arno has given to the profession is incredibly important for people to understand, not necessarily understand, but experience what he's really trying to convey to us, or what chiropractic itself is really, it's really created in this world. But, you know, I really believe in my heart, if everyone in the world got adjusted right now, the world wouldn't necessarily be a better place, as crazy as that sounds. I don't think we're evolved enough as a species to really have chiropractic scale itself. And we see it in our schools and our institutions right now. As it grows, you know, demand is created. So now they're trying to put medicine in chiropractic schools. because when something grows to a certain extent, it feels like it wants to create some kind of artificial demand, I call it. And pretty much every profession is guilty of doing this. Banks get people more in debt. Pharmaceutical companies keep more people more dependent on drugs. Governments get people more dependent on governments. So it's technology is getting people more addicted to technology. And if chiropractic were to become this huge thing and become like corporatized, let's say a big body owns a bunch of schools, we would fall in the same fate of these mainstream professions. I don't think the problems that we vilify medical doctors with is necessarily a medical problem or a medicine problem. It's a problem of consciousness. And right now in our evolution, we're just not evolved enough to be fully selfless. But essentially, I tell a lot of people, every goal of every entity should be to make itself obsolete eventually. You guys understand what that means?
Do you feel like it should be that way in chiropractic as well?
I believe ultimately, in humanity's history, chiropractic will no longer exist eventually. It'll be so mainstream and big that everyone will know how to adjust each other. So I believe someday it's going to be incorporated into our schools, and every human being on this earth will know how to adjust each other. But I believe I'm trying to create a platform right now to get people to work towards this philosophy of making themselves obsolete. So an example would be, if you were a lawyer, like a divorce lawyer, the best way you can serve your clients is to help people not get divorced. You would transcend past being a lawyer and you would look at it from a humanistic level and not help your client demolish their spouse. But how many professions have that intention? How many medical doctors are willing to stop practicing medicine and helping people become healthier, getting them to exercise more, getting them to be happy, getting them to love more? Because if a profession were to do that, eventually it would just eradicate itself into non-existence. And I could see that happening in our profession. That chiropractic will be, because we love chiropractic so much, we'll make it some kind of this necessity that everyone needs to see a chiropractor. And then we would create eventually artificial demand, I call it. But essentially every profession falls through this process. We see it in Facebook right now. Facebook really served our culture well, and it still does. It allows us to communicate. I mean, Facebook allows me to communicate with Nicholas and to reach out to Arno. So it's really amazing for me to touch with my friends anytime I want. But our data is being manipulated. I mean, our data is being used and sold. And this commercialism of this information that we're getting is getting us to be more consumer-centric, I call it. And, people are waiting for Facebook to be replaced by something else. A majority of people. It's just the best thing we have right now. And Google is the best thing we have right now. And right now, like in politics in US, the best thing we have right now are two damn parties that seem to not get along at all. So, I'm not necessarily a libertarian, but I do want government to be smaller. I would like to see a world where, people are so enriched and empowered that they don't need to rely on governments to tell them what to do. So, this practice that I have, I do want people to see me less. And ironic as it sounds, the more I have this belief, the more they want to see me, the more other people want to see me. Because it's really not about they need chiropractic. It's like they need deeper connection with themselves. So if I can get people to chase their dreams, or to be brave enough to divorce their spouse that they're not in love with anymore, or to get them to move to another country, then that's what I'm gonna help people work towards. I don't necessarily tell them to do these things all the time, but I do give them advice like, you should do what's important for you. You should listen to yourself more. And I make that a majority of my dialogue, because like Arno, I also want to raise consciousness within people. And to my knowledge, he was the only person really talking in this way, with maybe the exception of Donnie Epstein. I did mention to Nicholas, Joe Dispenza's worth looking into if you guys haven't done any of his seminars or read any of his books. Most of our, the chiropractic giants eventually stop practicing chiropractic to some level. You notice the trend. Joe Dispenza, John DeMartini, have you guys heard of him? Yeah, he's also worth looking into. It gets you to identify your values, and once you can identify your values and identify other people's values, you can learn how to communicate with them better. So John DeMartini's work was very useful for me in the beginning of my practice. And somewhere down the line, Joe Dispenza to some degree, even though I very much practice or see things like a Joe Dispenza would. I didn't even know he existed until someone told me about him. But I've taken a seminar. It's quite amazing. He's found a way to scale chiropractic at a very different level. He teaches meditation and people to, awaken within themselves. So I'm not saying chiropractic is not useful, but like I said, if you can expand your scope or expand your perception of what you're doing and remove any identity, it's going to serve you a lot better in your practice. Because if you don't have any identity, you're not dividing anything. The minute you're proud that you're a chiropractor, people may have certain ideas of what chiropractic is due to whatever misperceptions that they have. But if you can introduce yourself like, I'm a person that raises consciousness. If you're meeting a stranger and you're saying that, it's going to be a lot more attractive for them, because they'll be interested in what you do and who you are. But if the minute you say you're a title of something, people are going to have assumptions of what that something is. And usually it's not really accurate. And if you meet enough chiropractors around the country, you also realize every chiropractor is very different in the way they practice. So, the word chiropractic itself is very vague. So I would say, develop a type of practice that it's very aligned with who you are. And when you guys introduce yourself to strangers or do talks, talk about that person that you are rather than what you do. I mean, on a humanistic level, people are more interested in who you are than what you do anyways. It's very innate. You guys get where I'm going at?
Yep.
Has everyone here taken MLS? And all of you guys going to Palmer?
I go to Life West.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I think Thomas also goes to Life West, and the rest of their rest is all go to Palmer.
Cool. I still have family that are in the Bay Area, so Life West is it's a very good school to go to. But I hear good things about Palmer. It really doesn't matter what school you go to on that kind of grander scale, even though I told Nicholas to go to Life West, because there's tons of practitioners that come from even a school like LECC. I don't know what it's called now. They're very good chiropractors. So, but I would say if you're going to a school that has less seminars, you have to go out of your way more to find them. Or like what you've done in Palmer, you've had people from MLS come to you. So
yep, I mean MLS is definitely growing right here.
yeah.
And yep, the next chapter will be the Tylor and his team will be taking it forward.
Cool. Yeah, and then on that note too, it would be useful for you guys to even invite other people to come to teach you guys in different techniques if you're going to Palmer. I mentioned like motion palpation. Have they ever came to your school? Or
yes,
did they go to Life West, the Motion Palpation Institute?
Sorry, what about the motion palpation?
Did they offer seminars? Or are they going to Life West?
Not specifically on that.
Yeah.
There's a motion up here on campus.
Yeah, they're very strong mechanical adjusters. There's very little philosophy in their work because they just look at joint fixation and that's how they see it. But they're very solid adjusters. So if you guys are doing like a Gunstead, they're very good at the cervicals.
Right, yeah. They offer that at like our Gonstead classes with assessing with motion palpation. I've never been to a Gonstead seminar, so I don't know.
Yeah. Where are you at? Life West.
Where?
Yeah, like what quarter are you in?
I'm in 7th quarter out of 12.
Cool. Okay, any more questions? I see something on chat.
Mm-hmm.
Motion palpation talk against chiropractic. Okay.
If we don't have anything else, I just want to thank you, Doc, for taking your time. I know it's morning for you. It's the evening for us, so we appreciate.
Yep.
100%.
Thank you so much for speaking.
You're welcome. My pleasure. It's my pleasure to do this talk.